Hi everyone, and welcome to the Friday, February 18th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone. I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, well, Scott, let's start out by doing a post-mortem on the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Because everybody watches a commercial.
Sure.
Even people don't watch the game, watch the commercial.
Right.
What was there? 24 ads for technology of some form?
Yeah, it was a real big tech Super Bowl again.
And 6 for electric vehicles and 4 for cyber currencies. Now, the big number isn't that surprising. The second one kind of is. I mean, that's a lot of electric vehicles. And I guess the winner on that one was Kia.
Yeah, I mean the winner, but also, you can say even Tesla that didn't spend a dime.
Yeah.
And yet 6 ads, some for cars that aren't even available on the market, really gives legitimacy to the EV movement.
Right.
And while that's great news for the planet and great news for variety and all that stuff, it really helps the big maker of EVs right now.
Yeah.
Because if anyone saw those ads and was tempted, well, if I want one tomorrow, well, heck, I can't even get a Tesla. I mean, the supply chain concerns being what they are, but some companies are cranking them out right now. Nissan, Kia's got one, Volvo, Tesla. So if you are making an EV right now, it's really good news because it's now in the zeitgeist.
Yes. And Elon can sit back with his arms folded and get millions of dollars worth of free advertising and not spend a nickel. Everybody else there spent $10 million, $20 million to do this ad and get the placement. And he can just enjoy the penumbra of all of that attention.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you can count Tesla as the first mover, but the early successful mover sometimes has that advantage when everyone else has to play catch up. And in this case, a very expensive catch up. And I would wonder, when I talked to my friends after the Super Bowl, they remembered, hey, there were a lot of EV ads, but they didn't remember specifically what they were.
Right.
And so that does play into the hand if you're already a EV maker who can say, buy my car now. But overall, I think it's just good news because people are willing to spend, people are interested in these things, and we're going to see a whole lot more in the near future, and that's good news.
The amount of money spent on some of these things. The Kia was interesting because I think people got interested in that commercial because of the dog as opposed to the vehicle.
Right.
That was a cute little dog. The Arnold Schwarzenegger, Salma Hayek ad, I logically didn't follow. That if he's having to recharge everything as Zeus, that's kind of a negative thing about electric vehicles. I think the whole point of that one was just to put Salma Hayek in a toga.
Well, right, and I must say, that one narratively was a weird ad. I was watching it thinking, is that Schwarzenegger? Because I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah. Which
took my eyes off of whatever the ad was about. I was trying to figure out, did they cast Schwarzenegger as Zeus? Okay, but I'm halfway through the ad when I figured out, oh yeah, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger talking to Salma Hayek, but I missed the first half of whatever the ad was about. So sometimes a celebrity, I think, can get in the way.
Yeah, and I think some of these Super Bowl commercials, they get too smart for their own good.
Right.
They overwork it. It's a portfolio builder for the ad agency.
But you mentioned the LeBron James, old LeBron James talking to young LeBron, right? And then Larry David, who's famously old and crotchety. There is a message that crypto companies are putting out there, which is
young people.
Yeah, hey, this is the way of the future. And it's interesting that they use Larry David, who's one of the richest people on the planet in actual dollars, to say, hey, go invest in this speculative, crazy investment.
And I guess the message of that one was, this is a guy going through history always missing the boat on good ideas.
Right, and yet I think he came up with a pretty good one in Seinfeld that made him hundreds of millions of dollars. Not a bad idea.
Yeah, and interestingly, the most successful of the crypto ads was the one that just ran that data across the screen for a minute.
Well, it was a QR.
It was a
box.
QR, and you just held your phone up to it, and you got
Coinbase,
$15 worth of free Bitcoin.
Yeah. What was interesting was...
So that must have been the cheapest commercial on the Super Bowl.
Well, but it cost a lot to air it during there, but right.
Oh yeah, well, placement, yeah.
But it was clever, and yet at the same time, so many people jumped onto the Coinbase site, it crashed.
It crashed the site.
Which, gets more press, I get it. But what was interesting to me was I, and anyone probably my age, was looking at that and maybe said, hey, there's a QR code on the screen. And while we were digesting that mental information, young people in the room are holding up their phones.
And their phones right up.
Instantly, they're like on the Coinbase site. So again, it's targeting people who were quick to get it, and good for them. And that much discussion about crypto again puts it into the zeitgeist. But how many people could really tell you which companies were advertising other than Coinbase, which is the big one anyway?
Right. So is this 1999 again with the Super Bowl awash in commercials for new companies and all that, or is it 1958 with all the car companies taking out an hour of prime time and showing off their new cars?
I mean, maybe more 58 than 99. Remember, 99 was sock puppets, companies that quickly went away. Most of the advertisers, I think, are going to be around. Coinbase is pretty established. You had was it Matthew McConaughey for Salesforce? Am I missing?
Yes.
So, these are established companies that are spending a lot of money, but they're not going to go away because of their marketing budget.
Salesforce.
Right. And so they're trying to out-clever themselves. They're trying to get themselves into your consciousness so that maybe you not only watch the ad, but go to a website or download an app or something. That seems to be
and that ability to hold up your phone and go right to the website, that changes a lot of things. It doesn't have to linger in your mind very long.
Right. And guarantee every old person in the room is like, what a stupid idea to send a QR code. Every young person is already on the Coinbase website checking it out. So
now, is crashing the site, initially you think, well, that can't be good. They're losing potential customers. But on the other hand, isn't that exactly the story they want? Remember when Victoria's Secret, the first time they did a fashion show, it crashed the web?
Right. And it brought all sorts of publicity. So many people wanted on, it crashed the site. So, right, in practice, or in theory, it doesn't make sense to crash your site.
But
because
it's a PR thing. It's huge.
It made the ad last even longer, way beyond the Super Bowl. And isn't that the goal? But that doesn't just happen. Something sort of magical has to happen. In this case, it was crashing the site because so many people knew to lift up their phones and check out that QR code. So in that way, it was a smart move by Coinbase.
And a turning point.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go all the way up to we're now at the bottom of the pyramid of technology. Let's go way up to the top, the apex. Chips.
Yeah.
They're doing great.
It's a chip and chip equipment world even today. And I know that's one of your long-term...
Always.
Right. So good for you.
It's always there at the top of the food chain. The question is, what's driving it? Is it still the shortages?
A little bit is the shortage, but remember, the shortages were expected to hit the bottom lines of these companies. NVIDIA managed to sell a whole bunch of chips. Applied Materials managed to sell a whole bunch of chip equipment. Some of these stock prices for chip companies is really, really strong still. And yes, there's a little bit of the shortage because everything they make is desperately needed. But who needs it? People buying new hardware, cars that need it for their autonomous driving, even Bitcoin companies for their mining.
Think of all those cars that have to be repaired now after 2 years of sitting in the garage. I think demand's going to surge, which is unfortunate for some car companies because they can't build them right now because of chip shortages.
Yeah, and I remember in the first year of the pandemic, hardware was super, super hot in demand because, all right, we need to get stronger stuff that we use at home because we're now in the home office.
It's got to be more robust, and the kids are going to jump on it.
Yeah, and I wonder with companies gradually bringing people back, but still some are delaying, are we going to see another hardware surge because, once again, we're going to have to be robust from our dens or offices or whatever?
Well, we'll see. Good for them. Yeah. As long as the chip industry stays strong in the U.S., I think the U.S. economy, they're that important. The U.S. economy stays strong. This is from Jordan. Jordan sent this to me last night. He said, we should talk about the Santa Clara County's COVID response. The pandemic seems to be turning into an endemic now. I went to lunch with several people last week. First time I'd done that in a very, very long time. I noticed, yeah, everybody took off their masks in the restaurant, but people were coming in without their masks on. I mean, we're seeing kind of a bifurcation of our society between people. I go on a walk a couple miles every day, and I see people outdoors at a park, nobody around for 200 feet, wearing their masks.
Right.
And I see other people now who have just dropped the mask and they're going into stores and restaurants and that kind of thing. People are still trying to get the measure of what the situation is. Santa Clara County seems to be the most conservative of all the counties in the Bay Area with this. Is that going to affect Silicon Valley?
It might, but I think, and Jordan has a good point in bringing this up because it is very specifically right there in the center of Silicon Valley, and it has, since the very early days, been the most conservative place, not politically, but in terms of being strong on the masks, vaccinations, slow to get out of various quarantine rules, and their management is, let's do this gradually and look at all the science very closely. My guess, though, is it won't last much longer because eventually all
Months,
these businesses,
weeks,
days, maybe weeks at most, only because my guess is businesses are going to say, wait a minute, 5 miles that way, we can go to lunch and do
I could drive to Mountain View. Right. I could literally go across the freeway from my house, and there's a whole different set of rules.
Right. And if you are loosening the reins on businesses for the first time in a while, those businesses are going to want to open up their doors, which is great.
Yeah.
But just down the road, if you can't compete, they're going to get angry. And, Santa Clara County is also proud of its businesses, small and large. And so I think it's, it'll be interesting to watch because they are more careful than other counties, perhaps. But it can't last that long, or else people will start to mutiny.
Yes, absolutely.
Hopefully not with trucks, though.
Yes, not with trucks. With their Teslas, they'll block the roads.
It'll be a Tesla blockade.
Speaking of being proud of your county, joint venture Silicon Valley. They came out with their annual stats. These are staggering.
They always are.
Yeah, but you would think there'd be some downturn over the last couple years, and yet in Silicon Valley, the market cap of public tech companies doubled since 2020, from $7 trillion to $14 trillion.
And that's in 2 years. 2 years that were initially thought to be a super slowdown for a lot of businesses, but tech just took off. 14
trillion. That's got to be higher than the GMP of all but 20 or 30 countries in the world. This county, which was orchards 60 years ago. Meanwhile, VCs, their investments hit an all-time high of $95 billion last year. And they did this over Zoom calls because nobody was trooping up to Sand Hill Road, and sitting to talk to Reid Hoffman.
Right, and this speaks to, and these are also stats in the joint venture report, which is always fascinating to me. But it speaks to really the inequality that you see during a pandemic, not to mention a regular economy, but during a pandemic, so many people had to struggle to get to work, to get childcare, to get their jobs done. And VCs had so much cash to sit on that they were able to make a record amount of investments, which bodes well for the future of tech, while the rest of society is saying, can we even afford to live here? Do we have to leave because it's so expensive?
We'll get to that next.
Right.
But I wanted to mention $95 billion of VC investment.
Staggering.
I mean, you can remember, it's not that long ago when venture capital funds were announcing the first $1 billion funds. And it was staggering. Good Lord, they can raise that much money? Now they're investing that much money off of funds that have to be 2 or 3 times the size of that. Breathtaking. Okay, now let's talk about the other side. 69% of the homes sold last year in Silicon Valley went for above $1 million. Basically, your 3-bedroom, 2-bath suburban home that costs $225,000 in Iowa or Indiana is now going for above $1 million. I know all about that because I was helping my sister look for houses around here. Try to find a house under $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that, and that's 7 out of 10, which almost seems like it should be 8 or 9 out of 10. Just because of how
I wonder if it was
things...
just Santa Clara County what that number would be, because JVSV covers the peninsula and the East Bay and all that. I think if it was just Santa Clara County, it would have to be 1.2, 1.3. I'm seeing houses, you don't want to just say it, well, when I was a boy, but 10 years ago, houses in Sunnyvale were going for $750, $800, and it was kind of, wow, that's a lot of money. Same houses. I just saw one $2.6 million, $600,000 over asking price.
Right.
Yeah. How do you live here? How do you move here?
No, you don't. I mean, we have, and literally the venture capital number speaks to, hey, let's fund a lot of startups.
Yeah.
Who starts startups? Young people.
Young people.
The very next stat says, well, good luck living here, young people.
Right.
And so I worry about which side of that is going to win. We're attracting young people, but are we even giving them a chance to live here because rents are also high?
Well, I noticed some towns are starting to talk about they're going to do something kind of nasty to quality of life. They're talking about taking these big schoolyards and chopping whole sections off of the fields around elementary schools and taking some of those fields and putting in housing in there.
I covered one set of low-income housing, sort of a groundbreaking that was right next to the police station in San Jose, and there's a back lot there that was sitting there. Well, good for them. That's a good use of a little bit of land.
Right.
We need more like that. I don't know that I'd cut into schools necessarily, but there is land, and this is an area that desperately needs more housing.
And obviously it's going vertical. I mean, there's no question the valley is going vertical.
Right.
Okay, top 10% of earners hold 75% of the wealth. That's not surprising. You get one trillionaire or 100 billionaire, and it's going to skew the numbers. What actually surprised me is I always thought that the top 10% of earners typically hold about 80% of the wealth.
Well, I think if you go to top 20% or something, they broke this down at joint venture, it was like 90% or something.
Yeah.
So if you go a little higher, you go much higher.
That's everybody,
Yeah, and again, the average yearly income speaks to that. It's
average
really
yearly income last year was 170 grand.
Skewed 100% by tech.
Yeah, completely.
These salaries that they're, and they're well-paid lawyers, etc. But tech is really where the competition for talent is, right. and they're paying high salaries.
Meanwhile, the average income for service workers, here's your bifurcation of the
right.
local economy. Average income for service workers was $31,000.
Right.
That's a big difference between 170 and 30.
And that speaks to how hard it is to live here for a huge percentage of the population.
And, I don't even have to look at the service worker salaries. I looked at the average salary, $170K a year. You're not living high in Silicon Valley at $170K a year.
Right.
You're not buying a house
at
$170K a year.
And that's the average.
And what do you do at 31?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Crypto. We've been talking so much about crypto in the last couple of years, and the one selling point was it's pretty safe. The government can't find out about you and all that. And yet, and this is kind of a worrisome situation. The Canadian trucker protest, whatever you think about it, you've got to wonder how the Canadian government can suddenly just snatch away the crypto wallets of the organizers of that event. My first thought was, even if you have criminal proof of their actions, which so far we haven't seen, the ability to go in and take somebody's money out of crypto is shocking. It sort of blows the whole notion of crypto, doesn't it?
Yes, but haven't we learned that whole notion, at least of secrecy and under the radar, has been blown for some time? We know that because thieves are able to get at it, and the IRS.
Yeah, the state now, though.
Right. Well, and I think that not to link thieves with the government, but those are the two organizations that these crypto people thought they were skirting. Thieves won't be able to see my money, neither will the government. But what have we seen? Lots of crypto scams and people stealing crypto.
We expect criminals to try.
Yes.
And we expect the IRS, too, because there is a law about having income taxes, right? You got to pay your earnings.
Right.
But for the government, by executive order, to just go in and grab this stuff because they don't like you is a chilling, precedent.
Right.
And you're hearing a lot of constitutional lawyers going, good Lord, this is not supposed to be ever happening.
Right, but that's what we're seeing. If they say that this fundraising that is being done is illegal, it's one thing to take the money and shut down the pipeline. They're saying they can do a similar thing with the crypto pipeline. And some people are saying, ooh, chilling effect. And yeah, I mean, the government can trace this stuff. And if I've gone blue in the face saying this, it's not under the radar.
Yeah.
Treat your crypto, well, not like you would treat money, because money is more safe and secure, but think of it in that way, that you're not getting away with anything simply because you're shifting from fiat to crypto. You have to be careful, you have to be secure somehow, and understand that the government is watching you.
Right. It's just, aren't there supposed to be legal steps in between here, where you have to go to some court or something to get a court order or a warrant or something? I'm not sure.
Well, I think
I think they shocked people that our notion was that, well, this is Canada, it's not the same rules, but there should be like a process in between. And I sense it's going to be a message to all sorts of states, countries all over the world, saying, oh, well, we can do that too. We'll just point at Canada. And they did it.
Right, but they haven't. Because the government was able to get some sort of an order to say, you can't fund this blockade because the blockade is illegal.
Right.
And so, what do you do if you can't fund an illegal blockade? You can't fund an illegal blockade with cryptocurrency either. I think that's the message that's here, is that if it's illegal, the government's going to take the money, whether it's crypto money or paper money.
Well, I can say it seemed awful preemptory. It seemed like you have to show conspiracy, you have to go through all sorts of hoops, and we want that to make sure this kind, a leader being able to do this preemptorily. In the United States, we have RICO laws. You have to, file on that and all of that before you can go. And to be able to go to GoFundMe and say, you're not giving it to them,
right?
And GoFundMe to go, whoops, we'll give all that money people gave specifically to this object, and we're just going to give it to charities. It's like, how do you get to do that?
Right. That seems illegal. That seems unethical. But again, I mean, people think that because something exists, it's going to work. And we're a little early in the crypto world, not to mention the GoFundMe world, because government doesn't understand it. Yeah. And if government doesn't understand it, that still might cost you money. So you still need to think, hey, the government that's going to frustrate me on the other end doesn't understand this. Maybe I should think twice about jumping in.
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds crazy, but trust me, folks, if your government doesn't understand how the technology works, they're not going to help you.
No.
They may take your money and put it somewhere else. So again,
I think it's just going to drive the whole crypto world even further underground, or drive a replacement for crypto.
Right. I mean, maybe more a replacement, because it's tried to go underground and it can't.
It can't. I should mention the companies impacted by these 34 crypto wallets taken were Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Monero, and Cardano. Well, that's big names. That's like the whole industry. Yeah.
Well, right. And so people know where to go to try to get these donations there. And I appreciate what they're trying to do. But again, if your government says it's illegal, they're going to crack down. And if they know where to find your money, they're going to find your money.
And they're going to. We knew this was coming.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned that a government is now saying it's illegal without actually proving it's illegal. Warrants, all that kind of stuff.
We're in some new territory, no doubt. And we're in new territory regardless of the currency we're talking about.
Right, we're in new territory everywhere.
Right, and that just means everything is kind of new. And, whether you're Justin Trudeau or Joe Biden or anyone dealing with this stuff, it's new. And, for any investor or donator or trucker or protester, I would just say, go in with a little bit of, obviously you're skeptical.
We've said this all along.
Right.
Now we've added a new version of frothy, a new definition for the list of frothy.
Go in with skepticism about whether your big idea of the technology or the cryptocurrency is even going to work, because you're dealing with people who don't know how it works.
Because with all this volatility, Ukraine, the truckers' protests, inflation and all that, the market fell a lot.
Right.
Fell 600 points yesterday.
And what went up? Oil went up
Yeah.
into the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, oil, who talks about that as a sexy investment? In fact, there's probably one less sexy investment right now than oil, and that's gold,
Yes.
which also went up
Yeah.
because it's a safe haven when things are looking dire.
I'm in the position of the funeral operator that mixed feelings that you read about a local plane crash, because it's good for business, bad thing.
Right.
I'm lucky because I bought my ancestors' Oklahoma land rush farm. It's just farmland. However, it has 3 oil wells on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're like Jed Clampett.
Now, what my dad used to joke that he buried my mom for her oil money, then he discovered it was $20 a year. Well, it ain't $20 a year anymore, especially when the oil company said, hey, can we drill some more? So I'm in that ambivalence. When I'm at the gas station, I'm just shouting profanities at the pump. But once a month I get a check. And it kind of makes it all worthwhile.
I didn't realize you were a podcast host and an oil baron.
And an oil baron, yeah.
Great.
Okay, so is this a harbinger? I mean, is this bad week a sign that we're having to face reality? We can't keep floating above it all. We're going to get brought down to earth because of all the economic pressure, the international situation, and all that.
I don't know.
So the question is, are we heading into a downturn?
I don't know. I mean, well, probably because things are just so high and hot and heavy. And we saw, I mean, look at some of the stocks that soared during the pandemic. They're really coming down to earth.
Yes.
So we may be seeing that sort of a...
Roku, by the way. I didn't mention Roku, the latest, yeah.
Woof. I mean, these are companies that did really well for a couple of years. And now people are saying, show us the money, show us the earnings. And even good earnings are getting punished because they're not spectacular.
Yes.
But does Roku deserve to be a $400 stock? Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe
and
not.
We're seeing a lot of that, and I understand that that's gonna have its reckoning. But look, this week saw the truckers, the cryptocurrency trying to get to the truckers, all these brand new, crazy pandemic-related concerns.
New phenomena.
Oh, and by the way, Russia might invade a country. Yeah. The oldest game in the world, the geopolitics, coming into the forefront. So just almost a reminder, a slap in the face of all you people worried about the price of crypto. There are real issues going on here and real people facing, the barrels of guns.
As much as you try to live in the virtual world 100% of the time, nature always reasserts itself, and you've got to come back down to ground.
Well said, yes.
Okay, finally, Facebook Meta. This was interesting. They changed their name, changed their operation from newsfeed to feed.
Yeah.
And I read that and I just started laughing. I thought, well, that's pretty appropriate because now that we know that about half the stuff they censored was in fact true, and who knows how much more will be true. Our betters who have decided what we're allowed to read and not read and what we're allowed to hear about and not hear about have suddenly announced, well, wait a minute, maybe we aren't actually covering the news. We're just feeding you stuff that we think you're allowed to see.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on Facebook dropping the word news from its feed because, I could go on for a whole podcast about that, other than to say, that's accurate branding.
Yeah.
You can call yourself Meta or whatever.
Yeah, whatever they want.
Just don't call yourself news.
Yeah, take news off that thing.
Good for them.
Good. Okay, well, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If we had one more thing, I'm going to run out of breath. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.